way I analyze the mental game of Splatoon, you have three aspects of the game that demand your attention and that you need to balance in your head. To be clear, people don't really multitask regarding what they're focusing on. They can switch between multiple different things they're focusing on, and they can switch fairly quickly, but you're only ever going to be focusing on one of these three things at a time. This is why texting and driving is such a terrible idea. You really do have to take your mind completely off the road for at least the amount of time it takes to figure out where to find the keys you need to press, and that's plenty of time to get in an accident. Two of the three aspects of Splatoon's mental game, mechanics and decision-making, are tested in solo queue. Mechanics are your ability to move your character and aim to either traverse the map, win fights, or both at the same time. I also include low-level, fast-paced decisions like which direction should I dodge to avoid this bomb or throw their aim off in this category, because that's a decision that's heavily influenced by what you're capable of executing and keeps your attention on what's right in front of you in the short term. This category, mechanics, is where you want to be if you're in a fight right now and you need to win it. But if you only ever think about these aspects of the game, you'll end up rushing into engagements without realizing they're disadvantageous and dying a lot even if you're the stronger mechanical player. You'll miss important information about how the objective needs to be played. Maybe you get too far ahead of it or take fights your teammates can't follow you into, and your team will lose its ability to control it. Decision making is typically what you want to shift to in between fights. It's what helps you decide what fights to take, which to disengage from, and, more often, which to avoid entirely. It's how and when you decide to play the objective, and whether you decide to move in the same direction as a teammate or flank someplace else. This, in my opinion, is the aspect of the game that's most important to think about and train, because a good decision maker can beat a more mechanically skilled player if they put themselves into fights that are easier to win. I also talk about it more often because it's far more complex. It depends on major variables like what weapon you're using or the map mode, and it varies a lot more from patch to patch, or even just as our collective understanding of the game improves. It's what my whole series, What Am I Doing, is based on. The third aspect of the game, team coordination, is very, very limited in solo queue, which means the game changes drastically once you get on a call with your teammates. You have some basic ideas with This Way, Ouch, and Booyah that I've talked about before, but rather than having to look around the map and see where your teammates are going, in a voice call, they're telling you where they're going. And your job is to play off that call as quickly as possible, or even to know what the plan is from a team conversation prior to the game and not need a call out, rather than coming up with your own loosely compatible plan on the spot. Callouts don't just change the way you make decisions. They also add something more that you need to focus on than you're used to if you've only played solo queue before. You will notice that your mechanics get a little worse, that you're missing shots you normally hit or screwing up movement while you're using callouts, because you need to focus on what's in your ears and what you should say, what you should decide not to say to keep the comms clear, how to say that thing in the fastest way possible without making it more confusing for saying it that way, and not just what's happening in range of your Inkling's weapon. You're mildly distracted from all the things you were thinking about in solo queue. This means that if you're a competitive player and your primary goal is to play well in a coordinated context, this changes the way you want to practice using solo queue. The decision-making and especially team coordination aspects of the game will be considerably different. In some ways, decision-making becomes more difficult in solo queue because you don't have as much of a plan ahead of time and need to improvise, and you also have to come up with everything yourself. You'll learn a lot about decision-making from being in this situation because you'll never have someone else in your ear telling you what decision to make based on information you aren't in a position to collect. But you may also have to unlearn some things about decision-making from what works in solo queue. Coordinated competitive teams are more likely to be aware of counter strategies for gimmicky playstyles that might work in solo queue. Since they're coordinated, strategies dependent on stealth are foiled if even just one player on that team sees you, and it doesn't have to be the player you're targeting. Also, what might have been a good plan in a coordinated context where you could get everyone on the same page to join in on your plan can be really weak in solo queue, where, with no way to communicate those intentions, you're less likely to get the follow-up you need from your teammates. Mechanics are basically the only part of the game that will work largely the same way in both solo queue and coordinated play. So as a new competitive player, if you watch back a recording of your gameplay, you'll probably notice that you're missing a lot of callouts, and that you've got tunnel vision a lot of the time, and that your movement and aim are worse than you've come to expect of yourself. This is normal, you're just getting overwhelmed. To start working on it, try to remember what exactly you were thinking at the time and what motivated you to do what you did. Then think about what alarm bells, what warning signs were there on screen that you ignored, and work on conditioning yourself to notice those things even more keenly over the extra mental noise you're dealing with. With time, different aspects of the game will start to become second nature, and it'll free your mind up to focus on more complex decisions, or more nuance in engagements, or more efficient, useful callouts. Use solo queue to hone your mechanics and practice basic decision making and awareness, like keeping yourself alive, when to play the objective, and which fights you'll win and which you'll lose. Use team practice to learn coordination-related skills, and to get used to the different decision trees you'll have to navigate during a tournament set. Treat mechanics practice and more individual decision-making as homework that you do away from practice to maximize the value of the time you get when you bring everyone on the team together. And above all, when you're in tournament, use every tactic you have to relax. Anything you're thinking outside of these three aspects of the game, any emotion that takes your mind off what you have to do next, is another distraction. And with so much you already have to focus on in-game, you don't have room for that if you want to play your best.